started playing music as a kid, my plan, because my mother had been a teacher and her father had been a teacher, was I expected that I was going to be a music teacher. That was my plan. And from the age of 16, I started teaching guitar. And I taught guitar as this is what I do for about 11 years. And then the disco era happened. And no one wanted to play acoustic guitar. And I started working more as a performing musician. I had studied with a woman named Ron McKinnon, who, in her amazingly varied career, one of the things that she did was she played piano behind Mahalia Jackson. And she could belt like Mahalia. And I studied with her. So that made Mahalia Jackson my grand teacher. And I started doing all of that wailing and all that kind of stuff.
I had music training. I played trumpet at age 9 you had to pick an instrument. My brother played the trumpet, so since there was already one in the house and no expense would be incurred, I became a trumpet player. So I studied that privately and learned to read music some, and then early in my career I got with a teacher, a local guy who knew all the Duane Eddy instrumentals. Duane Eddy was really, instrumentals are big then. Now there's no such thing as an instrumental hit. But back then, the charts were full of instrumentals. Duane Eddy had all these twangy guitar things. He taught me all those songs. And then my mother found me a real teacher nearby. I grew up in Westchester, in the suburbs. And this guy was a really good teacher, great guy and a really good teacher, very strong and very demanding. So I got a lot of training early on, but only privately. I didn't go to college. I was not academically inclined. And the Beatles had hit. Now when I started playing professionally in 1961 in high school, I was in a band. We were on Ted Mack Amateur Hour. We didn't win, but I still have the video of it. And
here they are, the Continentals.
What's the word? Thunderbird. I'm gonna ride, yeah, in my Thunderbird. I'll cruise around, pick up all the girls. I'm gonna motor right down the street, pick up all the girls that I meet. Go take a ride, come on, baby, it's my Thunderbird, Thunderbird.
Anyway, we didn't win, but then I got in a band that was working. So I was already working before the Beatles hit, playing rock and roll, rhythm and blues, and some standards. And then the Beatles, that's what created the business. It opened up the business. The demand went through the roof. The whole business changed. And so I couldn't stay in college and sit around upstate New York. I had to get back to New York and play, and I got very lucky. My close friend in high school was Danny Korchmar, who went on to be very successful with James Taylor and Carole King, and has had a tremendous career. And we had a band, and we got lucky and started working 6 nights a week. There were clubs where you worked 6 nights a week, sometimes for months at a stretch, and they paid you, and you made a living. And so at 19, I was living in Manhattan and making a full-time living, playing rock and roll. And it was the Beatles that opened up this demand. The whole culture exploded after that. Woodstock and everything. And I was very lucky because I was right there, and there was a huge demand. Once that band, the King Bees, broke up, there was a huge demand in the studio business. The studio business was booming thanks to the Beatles. Suddenly it had exploded. Folk rock, songwriters, Beatlesque things, covers of Beatles songs was a whole industry, which led to commercials, jingles. So I was very lucky because I'd had enough music training to be able to sit in the studio and kind of know where I was in the music, and I knew the contemporary sound, which the older guitar players, as brilliant as they were, they just didn't have a clue. So suddenly at 21 I was a New York studio musician. And that led to theater. I got into doing shows, and also I wanted to be a good guitar player, so I worked at it. I studied with a couple of great teachers, especially Barry Galbraith, who was a giant of the jazz scene before he had a nervous condition. He couldn't play anymore. He was a great teacher, but he was a giant musician and big in the jazz scene. He played with Benny Goodman. He played on every session, and he was very good. So I kept looking to be a better musician, not just a glam rocker.
I started in grade school, as most people do, and I continued on through. I sang in the junior choir. I got into high school, I sang in the musicals, and when I went to college, I auditioned for both the band and the chorus, and surprisingly got into both. I'm not a music major or anything of that sort, and so my first semester I was in both the band and chorus, and found out that rehearsing 3 nights a week kind of cut into the studies. So I told the directors, I said, you can have one or the other, my instrument, which is a clarinet, or my voice. You can't have them both. They said, well, I have 5 clarinet players, but only 3 basses, so I'll take your voice. So I sang all through college, and when I graduated from college, I joined a barbershop group, and so I sang barbershop for several years. I got a little tired of the competition aspect of barbershopping. It was fun music to do, but it was the competition got to be more of a task than I really wanted to continue with, so I dropped out of that. And I've since then picked up several other choral groups. One was called the Lebanon Community Chorus. When that stopped, I joined a group known as Harmony Night, sang there for several years. And when they changed the rehearsal schedule, I couldn't continue with them, so now I sing with Juneberry as well as Evergreen. So that keeps me fairly busy musically.
When I started out, I had no idea I was going to wind up doing music for therapeutic recreation. It's not the kind of thing that one gets out of bed one day and says, I'm going to do music for therapeutic recreation when I grow up. I kind of fell into it backwards. A friend of mine asked me if I would go with her to sing at the local nursing home, because I played guitar and she didn't. And I said, okay. So we went over there, and we were about 16 years old, and we had all our music spread out on the floor. We sat down on the floor, and I think the nursing home residents must have been really amused watching us and looking down on the floor in the day room. And then from there I started going to various nursing homes in the area with the local youth council, because I played guitar and they didn't, so we would be going in buses to these various nursing homes. And then when I was in college, a friend of mine said, you know, there were these nursing homes in Long Beach, we could go there and they would give us some money. I said, really? She said, well, I'd like to go and sing there, but I don't play guitar. So this was the pattern. And I said, okay. And we did some gigs in Long Beach, and they paid us. And then some years later, I was playing bass, and I ended up playing bass with somebody who is now an agent in the field. And he got me involved with an organization that unfortunately is no more, called Hospital Audiences Incorporated, HAI, which eventually became Healing Arts Initiative, and now it's no longer. But I was with them for 32 years. And they sent me to every nursing home, psych facility, adult home, every type of facility gig that you can imagine. I played all over the metropolitan area and Long Island. And over time, got to know some of the recreation directors. One of them said to me, would you consider doing a full day for us here? And I said, but, I'm not a music therapist. He said, that's okay. I said, it is? And so he said, well, we'd like to have you for a whole day, like once a week. And I said, okay. And then after doing that for like a month or so, I got up the nerve to ask one of the recreation people at another place where I played pretty regularly, see, well, maybe they might want me on a regular basis. And they said, okay. And that was quite a number of years ago at this point, and now I'm an employee there. So, little by little, as my mother would say, all mixed up together, I wound up doing this kind of work.
I did a lot of Broadway, thousands of performances in a number of shows. I had a number of shows that I was the original guitar player at that closed, that didn't do well. And I had one that was a hit called Barnum, that went for 2 years. And I subbed. I was a sub on a lot of shows. And some of them, like the original Grease, I did that for 7 years. You know, almost constantly. The regular guitar player almost never played the show. And so I did a lot of that, and at the same time I went on the road with a lot of people. Peter and Gordon, Neil Diamond, Bette Midler, Barry Manilow, Patti LaBelle, Peter Allen, Paul Anka, Mary Travers, and others. I stopped going on the road in the mid-70s. I stopped doing the road. It was very lucrative, but it was very disruptive, and I'm a Taurus. We like to control our environment and be in it.
The reason that I became really intense about it was because my mother had Alzheimer's. As I was growing up, she was developing it. So I've lived literally most of my childhood with somebody who had Alzheimer's, and not the, you know, nice, happy, fun part of Alzheimer's, the screaming, throwing things, freaking out part of Alzheimer's. So I got used to those behaviors, so anything that a resident might do on a unit, just, I've been there, done that. Now that's, I would say, about 99% of the kind of work that I do is working in facilities and therapeutic recreation. And while by law I have to state I am not a licensed music therapist, I have been doing the work of a music therapist for a very long time now.
When Barnum closed in 1982, I got into the society field, where, you know, private parties in a tuxedo at the Waldorf and the Pierre and that stuff, Newport, and for the, you know, weddings, schlocky weddings on Long Island, and, you know, one night I'd be with Peter Duchin at the Waldorf, and the next night I'd be with some guy in Staten Island playing a wedding. So I got into that in order to be singing. Singing was the thing. I took a lot of singing lessons all through my Broadway career. For years, I took singing lessons in order to really learn how to use it. For being a guitar player, I saw that you had to take lessons to become a guitar player. What I'm known for is a guy who can sing, who has repertoire of other people's songs, mostly songs that people are familiar with, in a number of styles, almost all styles of American popular music. And I sing them in tune and correctly, and I'm always on time, and I'm good at entertaining a small crowd of people. Or a big crowd of people, I just don't get big crowds of people. I've done some concerts for fairly large crowds over the years with my country band, and the response was great.
What's the word? Thunderbird. I'm gonna ride, yeah, in my Thunderbird. I'll cruise around, pick up all the girls. I'm gonna motor right down the street, pick up all the girls that I meet. Go take a ride, come on, baby, it's my Thunderbird, Thunderbird.